Hola, you are listening to First Gen Healing, a podcast on Latinx healing and awakening journeys. My name is Priscila Luna. I am your intuitive prima and also the host. And we are back with a part 2 with Denise, who we heard about in part 1 about her story. And in it, we weaved a little bit about growing up Catholic. And I think that as first gens, many of us have that experience of growing up with religious parents or family members. And then, of course, on here, we talk about healing and awakening. So sometimes our journeys rub us up against, this upbringing that we had, this conditioning that those around us had. And so I wanted to bring that topic to the table with Denise because she definitely has had experiences with that as well. I think we just kind of want to share how that experience comes into play for self, and then also how that evolves into others and their opinions and their, comentarios. So we'll get into that. But Denise, ¿cómo estás? Thank you so much for coming back for a part 2.
Thank you. I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. Okay. So this topic, yeah, I think it's juicy. I think there's a lot that we could talk about. But I think maybe I wanted to start off with like personal experiences of when you start to broaden or when you start to question. There we go. I think it starts with a questioning phase, right? Of
hmm
questioning what you learned, questioning what you were brought up with, and then a curiosity of like, is that something that I believe in? So for you, do you feel like it was through your healing and awakening where you started to question your upbringing in terms of religious beliefs? Or was that something that was always kind of ruminating in the back of your head growing up?
Well, growing up, I mean, that's all I knew, since I was a baby, like we were at church every Sunday. So to me, that was just the
Mm,
normal. That was the thing to do, not so much something that I felt within myself. But when you're
yeah.
kind of in that and living that, you don't really realize that, no, this is just something that you're doing because everyone else is doing it because your mom is telling you that you have to do it. It's something that is like kind of programmed within us that, oh no, we have to go to church. We have to go and pray to God.
Yeah. And I wonder if it was similar to you, where I feel like it's kind of going through the motions because there weren't a lot of like deeper, opened conversations. Like it's kind of like we go to church to say things and we do the misa, and then that's the extent of it. You're never really invited to explore your relationship with God, to like maybe the padres say it in the sermon in the misas, but not necessarily your parents. Did that happen to you too, or there were conversations about God in your home?
I don't really remember any conversations within the home, but I know that our relationship with the church was deeper than just every Sunday because, my mom would
Mm,
go into like the prayer groups and I got into choir and being an altar server and even teaching catechism to like little kids. So I was definitely
mm,
more involved than, just the ones that are just there like going religiously every Sunday.
I see. Okay. So then as you start to like awaken to a little bit more, did it feel controversial within you, like to start questioning what you had learned?
I would say just a little bit because I feel like I was all over the place. Like, okay, like I do believe in God, but I started feeling like there was something bigger than just that. You know what I mean? It's more than what the church presents to us. Um,
Mm,
so it was just a battle of going back and forth, like when I got rid of like my crucifixes and things like that, it almost felt like a grieving state. Because I remember like
interesting.
sometimes I would go to church, whether it was for a wedding or for whatever event, I would go and I would sit there and I would feel emotional because it was kind of like, okay, this was such a big part of me and now it's kind of dissolving.
Mm. What do you think started to open the door to the feeling of like something bigger? What was that experience actually like for you?
The acknowledgement of something bigger is just that. once I started kind of going through my awakening and, having experiences of, paranormal things, I guess you could say, it's like, okay, there's more. There's more than what just religion teaches us. There's a lot more
Mm,
within us, having prophetic dreams, like all these things. It's like, okay, I want to know
mm,
more. So I started, going into meditations and being brought more into like, oh, okay, Buddhism and like just different things, So I kind of started like dipping my toes and trying to figure out, okay, what else is there?
mm-hmm. When I was awakening, one thing that I did intuitively, it was like, I want to start from zero. Like, if I had no conditioning and no one told me anything, what would I believe? And what is my
Mm,
interpretation of this life? Right? Porque I realized that I think for me, it was very alive of what conditioning is. So I started to question everything. What food would I eat? Who would I be? What would I do? And so did the thought of like, what would I believe in? And the thought that first existed within me is like, we're on a floating rock in the middle of space. And I was like, whoa.
yes.
Right? Like that helps you zoom out so much. So then it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so like whatever God I believe in isn't just taking care of Earth. Like there's a whole universe to take care of,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
And so then that helped me because then it was like, well then it's not like it's just a specific religion. I don't think like God just like, oh, only this sector of humans on Earth. Like believe in me in this way. So that's the only ones that I'm here for. I was like questioning that. So it was really like, let me peel all the layers que pueda yo and
Mm-hmm.
question it all. And I don't think in that moment it felt, no, it did. It did feel como a betrayal of the God that I knew. Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
because I too, so back in 2016, my parents went through a divorce. I went through a breakup. It just felt like a lot of disorienting stuff. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember I had una veladora, una cruz, y un rosario on a little altar, kind of like the one you have behind you.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like to the God that I knew, right?
Yeah.
And during the really, really hard times where like sometimes I had a lot of anxiety, I would come there and I would do a rosario. And it honestly would help. It did
Mm-hmm.
help me like feel at ease. But when I started to go deeper into like awakening and questioning, then I decided to remove those things and I just brought like a vela and I would like meditate. Um, so I was like decentering all of that,
Mm-hmm.
but still, I think in the back of my head, I pictured the God that I grew up with. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I feel like for me, once I kind of started into like doing meditations and things like that, how I would pray would be to the universe. And I
Mm,
didn't really
mhm.
sit there and like think like, oh, okay, so it's not the God that was presented to me, but I just felt like it was just something bigger, bigger
Okay.
than what they teach us. And through
Mhm.
my journey, I feel like, yeah, like, no, it is correct. Like, he is so much bigger than what the church teaches us. I feel like it's like a little box, like, here's everything that you need to know
Mm,
according to the Catholic Church or to any religion. Um,
yeah.
but then in reality, it's like, oh, we have this huge, massive space. Like you said, it's like the universe. Like, there's so much more than just that little box that they give us.
Yeah. Do you think the way that you experienced God, let's say like God's presence, changed as you shifted to universe?
Yes. Because so for me, it was like, okay, they teach us that, okay, this is God. It's the man that's here on the crucifix. You go to every church and there he is, and they teach you to pray to him. But when I started my awakening, it just became something so much bigger. I was just like, wow, like that's not just the God that is out there. Like God is so much bigger. He is within everything, within
Mm,
everyone. We are God, like we are the children of God. Like I just started seeing it not just in people, but in nature. Just it was just
Mm.
expansive.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. Yeah. It like really broadened it up for you. Like it broadened the definition of, and that's such an interesting thought because I remember when I first was like glitching in and out of all of this, I became
Mm-hmm.
very vocal. I think in the past, como que era muy como like good girl with my parents and stuff. And I remember telling my mom, like, of course, la Virgen María es virgen, like, esos pervertidos. I feel like now I would address the conversation probably like different, with more
Mm-hmm.
respect. But I remember because I was really questioning stuff back then, I was very like open, and I was just like, I just don't believe in that, I don't believe in that, and I don't, and I remember seeing my mom's face, kind of like, what is this girl going through, like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and but I'm thankful to myself, I think, for even just allowing my thoughts to like expand. We kind of talked about it in part 1 where you go from one end and then you allow yourself to go to the other, and then maybe you recalibrate, right? Like maybe you're not like it's not one or the other, but I think at that point I needed to stretch my mind and allow
Mm-hmm.
myself to go wherever it needed to go, to be able to
Mm-hmm.
find my version of truth, let's say.
Yeah.
Um yeah. Do you think that those around you notice the shift within you? I mean, I know you mentioned like your mom goes to church often or every Sunday and is involved. So did that kind of shift the way that she related to you as you were going through this, or that you related to her?
In a sense, it did because the more open I became and the deeper I dived into this awakening, into this new version of myself, it was like there's just no understanding. And I feel like it's more on her end. Because
Mm,
for me, I'm like, oh, okay, like I understand, like this is your truth, this is your reality and your journey, and I respect it, but this is mine, and for
mm-hmm,
her, it was more of like, well, what about the God that I showed you? Did he
mm,
not mean anything? Like, what are you talking about? Like, what is this? And it was more of that, I don't I don't want to really say it, but I mean, it is what it is. Like, I feel like it's more of that victim mentality of like, did I not do enough
mm,
for you? Did I not teach you enough? Like, why all of a sudden, like, how are you
mm,
here and I'm still over here? So there
yeah.
there was that disconnect, and I feel like that lack of understanding as well, because she was like, no, I don't want to hear about your journey, I don't want to hear about
Mm,
your religion. And that's the moment that I was like, oh, wait a minute, you think I'm like involved in a whole different religion, but no, I'm not. Like, this has nothing to do with religion. This is about
mm-hmm.
me, my awakening, my journey. And it's so much bigger than a religion. And that's something that I feel like people within the religion um, can't grasp, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because it seems like we're in a different like freeway lane, no sé, como
Mm-hmm.
otro, like maybe we're just in a like there's no, they're not going to connect because somehow they can't hop on ours, although, or maybe like we're zoomed out a little bit and they can't
Mm-hmm.
zoom out. So like
Yeah.
I think similar to awaken, I mean to healing, I think a lot of first gens find themselves learning about boundaries and beliefs and patterns, right? And
Mm-hmm.
when we immerse ourselves back in our family units, sometimes it's so easy for us to start to identify them within our family. We then have to hold, oh, they're in this part of their journey, they don't see
Mm-hmm.
that yet, I see it, but I don't have to convince them or show them,
Mm-hmm.
so we're holding both. So I think like similarly, it's kind of like you're saying with religion, you held like, oh, she's here, not here, but I can respect her version of religion, but
Mm-hmm.
it's harder for her to respect yours, it sounds like, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because it's that lack of understanding. It's like you said, they're like so zoomed into their little world that they can't see the bigger picture. And for me, I'm like, oh, okay, you know what? I don't resonate with what you're doing and what your beliefs are, but I respect them and I understand that that's where you are and that's probably part of your journey. It's part of, the life that you chose to come and live. But
Mm.
mine is over here, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what's interesting? I wonder if you've experienced this is like, despite that, what we're talking about right now is like God and love and all of that. When I started to stray away, I even sometimes received like hateful stuff,
Mm,
like hateful comments towards things. So, for example, when I wasn't so into who I am now, and like I was like like I call it glitching. I was kind of going back and forth between the new and old me and who am
mm-hmm,
I. There were just moments where I was like, oh, I don't want to go to, like, vamos a ir a la iglesia. My family didn't go every weekend, but vamos a ir porque es Navidad, and I would just sit it out like, oh no, no voy a ir. At some point, one of my family members like was like, pues espero que nunca necesites a Dios, porque si
mm,
no, like ahí vas a ver que lo necesitas. Something like very como wishing bad upon me so I learn a
mm-hmm.
lesson. And
Yeah.
I remember, like this journey for us is not about hate or anything. So I was just looking at her and I was just like, why would you wish bad upon me so I learn about your God? Like,
Mm,
that hurt me, like as a family,
yeah.
like why would you say, "Oh, I hope you don't go through something so bad that like when you need him he's not there," and then you're going to be like, "Oh, I regret this."
Mm-hmm,
It's kind of like it was very evident that that person couldn't hold the space that I was holding for my own exploration.
mm-hmm.
Um yeah, I don't know, it's just like when I experienced that I was like, "Whoa, like it's crazy that this whole thing isn't even like I'm no sé, no es que estoy haciendo cosas mal. I don't know. I'm not like a robber and
Yeah.
like debating that. I'm debating God and that brought this ugly part of this person out.
I feel like that's very common within religion.
Mm.
I feel like a lot of people are just like, oh, okay, well, tú nomás vienes cuando te conviene o cuando necesitas algo.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like they kind of just,
Yeah.
they're very like, they attack you in that sort of way. And because of their lack of understanding as well, they're just like, oh, okay, es que tú no estás con Dios, like, and andas allá haciendo cosas malas. And it's just like, how? How am I doing something wrong? Just because my perception of God is different than yours doesn't make me a bad person. And
Yeah.
the church, I feel like, well, just not the church, just the people within religion and even outside of spirituality are just so judgmental and so easy to like right away, come and attack people within the spiritual community because they don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I do think that it's common. I think it was just like a very clear picture to me of like, whoa, I didn't know that I was going to start facing this kind of stuff, like
Mm-hmm.
just because I'm trying to explore my own version of it. It's like an example to me of like clear projection. Like you can take anything, aka like religion, and you project
Mm-hmm.
it out based on who you are. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, if you, for example, I have certain family members that are so criticones and criticonas, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
terrible. They just talk smack about people and yet están bien agarrados de la religión and they feel
Mm-hmm.
better than and and so when I started to notice that like they really do feel though like they're better than others because of how involved they are in church.
Mm-hmm.
Um
It's like a
so
sense of entitlement or something.
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And not to say, I think like sometimes spirituality can lead you to also feel better than, right? Like, for example, the fact that when I think of it as like we're able to zoom out and they're not, um, I do know that at some point, like we can be, or we should be wary of like not falling in the same thing, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, well, I'm better than because I know how to zoom out and hold space, but they don't. Um, I think like it's cool to understand that everyone, like you said, is on their own journey. And just because I got into this line of thinking doesn't make me better than,
Mm-hmm.
because then we're falling in the same,
In the same.
como,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
I feel like with anything that we do, it should just come from a place of love, and instead of
Mm,
like that hatred and that judgment. It's like, oh, okay, like I respect and I see you for who you are, but in the same aspect, it's like, okay, this is who I am. I'm not better than you. You're not better than me. Like we're just living our own journeys, and that's all it is. So I
yeah.
really don't understand why there's so much judgment when it comes, you know, on the other end, or even within spiritual community, like you said, because it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah. As you've started to lean into this part of your path where it's like you're a healer, and you started to get crystals and you started to tune in, something that maybe we hear a lot is like, oh, esas cosas son del diablo, right?
Hmm.
Or estás abriendo portales, different things
Yeah.
like that. Um, One, like how do you feel about it? Has there been hesitation and fear in what you explore? And then two, have people made comments about what you do and stuff like that?
Yes, I want to say all the above. So I've literally have had like my family come over and question. So first of all, we always go to my mom's house. That's where we meet. That's where we see each other. It's always at my mom's house. And one day I just get a phone call and I'm driving home and my
Mhm.
mom's like, "Hey, are you home?" And I'm like, "No, I just got off work. I'm on my way there." And she's like, "Oh, okay, I'll see you in a little bit." And it was her and my aunt coming over, and I'm like, okay, that is weird. Like right off the bat, I knew. I was like, no, they're here because my aunt is here from out of town and she's super religious, and they probably want to see
Oh.
what it's like, or to show my aunt like what I'm up to or what I'm doing. So needless to say, like I get home, and so kind of make a small quick dinner, and then all the questions start. So what is it that you're doing? Can you tell me, like, who are you? Like, what are you doing? What do you believe in? And so I start sharing. In my mind, I'm like, okay, yes, this is exactly why they're here. I start
Yeah.
sharing. I even shared with them my drum. I was like, oh look, this is my shamanic drum. I made this. Like, started sharing
Mm.
all kinds of things with them. And right away they're like, but you're not doing what God is wanting you to do. Why don't you go seek God? And for me, I was just like, I kind of laughed, and I started looking around, and I was like, what do you mean I need to go seek God? I'm like, God is here. God is here. He's everywhere. He's within you, within me. And I'm like, so what do you mean? Like, where must I go to go see God? Because if you're talking about church, he's not just there, he's everywhere, you know? And they kind of just looked at me because they weren't expecting that response. They looked at me like, well,
Mm.
like, okay, what do we say to that? But
Yeah.
it was just really like I didn't want to feel hurt, but like part of you still feels hurt when people come at you that way. Like, oh, okay, you're doing things that you're not supposed to. And I was just like, well, what am I supposed to do? And I was told,
Yeah.
well, read the Bible so you can seek all the answers that you're looking for. And I'm like, but I'm not seeking those answers. Like, I'm not seeking, so you're coming here to tell me that God is wanting me to do something and that it's within the Bible. So tell me. I'm like, I'm open to hearing what you believe I should be doing. And there was no
Mm.
answer to that. And
Mm.
it's just like, okay, well, I'm not doing anything to hurt anyone. Like, my expression is of love. Like, I'm here to hold space for people. It's a healing journey. It's something greater than just the church and what their teachings are.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's this I think like you said, it does hurt a little bit, and it's like it doesn't make sense because you were sharing from a place of like, okay, you want to know, like let me share, this is
Mm-hmm.
what I do, how I connect, etc. I've gotten similar, and I wanted to talk with you specifically about it because I think like when you start to become, let's say, like a healer or someone that connects with energy and stuff, your life path in some way becomes a surrender to like God,
Mhm.
universe, the plan, right? Or whatever, wherever you're being led. It's
Yeah.
I feel this ultimate surrender to
Yes.
this in some way. And it's so interesting that despite that, like, we still get those kind of comments from family, and like, for example, I've shared with my padrinos where I'm open, like, oh, well, I'm discovering that I'm intuitive and I like feel like this is my purpose. And su respuesta es like, deberías de acercarte más a Dios. Deberías. And I'm like, wait, what?
And them not
were
even
you not
realizing that
listening?
it's like, no, like I am so much more connected, like to a whole different extent now because of this path. And again, I feel
Yeah.
like it's just that lack of knowledge. And because again, like we are awakening and they're not. So for me, it's like, okay, like just having that grace for them. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to get upset with them. I'm not going to have a negative reaction to this. It's just like, okay, like you don't understand me and it's fine. I respect your views. Just respect mine and that's it.
Yeah. And for those of you listening, I want to mention también some other stuff that I've heard just to validate. And again, like, I think when we're on this path, we're not coming from a place of like, I need to prove them right or wrong. Like, I think on this path, you understand. Like you're saying,
Mhm.
we understand that it's not about that. But just FYI, despite this being my life the last couple of years, I still hear, ojalá algún día te acerques a una iglesia, ojalá algún día decidas ser parte de una iglesia a la que tú vayas, porque eso te hace falta en la vida. ¿Qué más he escuchado? No se olviden agradecerle a Dios por los sacrificios, like the Catholic is it,
Mhm.
la
Yeah.
cruz and all of that, que murió por nuestros pecados. So I think like what has helped me the most is just knowing there's no point in like putting energy towards that.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'm just like, see algún día, see, like in the past I remember I would waste energy and just be like, pero ya te dije que yo no necesito eso, que Dios está en todas partes, que no tienes que solo ir a la iglesia.
Mhm.
Um, but I think it would just now I see it as like it didn't necessarily shift anything, so I've just learned to not debate it. There's no
Yeah.
point in
There's
that.
there's no point. Like you said, there's definitely no point in fighting it. It's because like, okay, no, they're so set in their ways and they think that they are right. So it's just better to just be like, okay, yeah, sure. And just brush it off and move on.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate that we're getting to share this with people because I imagine when you're like dipping your toe and exploring outside of what you've been taught, it is
Yeah.
like, am I doing something bad? What if they tell me that I should go to church? And it's just like it helps to hear that other people are still moving forward on their path, but do
Hmm.
still hear things from family, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
I feel like initially I was so afraid to even use my voice and say, yeah, this is who I am. Like you said, you were
Yeah.
kind of hiding in the closet. Like when my home started kind of shifting from like having religious things to like, oh no, all that stuff is coming down and now it's more, spiritual things that are up and crystals and such. I was afraid when like the very first time my mom was going to come over and it was like my mom, my stepdad, my sister, and I was just like, oh my god. But yeah, so my whole house kind of shifted, and when they were coming over I was so afraid of like specifically her, like what is she going to say, what is she going to think. And she ended up saying nothing initially, like she said
Mm.
absolutely nothing. And I was like, oh my gosh, like all this, and she didn't say anything. But within time, as she started seeing the bigger shift, that's when all these other things started coming in. And I was just like, oh my god, okay.
Mm.
And I was so afraid to vocalize that, to even show myself. And now it's like I'm kind of stepping more into that, like, okay, this is me. And it's okay. Like, if, people don't like me, then that's fine. If people don't accept what I believe in and it doesn't resonate, then it's fine. But the right people will come to me and will see me by me showing up.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. at the end of the day, it's like aligning to your truth and being okay with those that don't. And yeah, and not taking it, if possible, right, personally, like the fact that you're
No.
being misunderstood, it's like, okay, that's okay. I think for some time I used to think like, was just I want them to know me fully, and I want them to understand me fully. Um, but I've learned like it's a process. It's a process, and also I've needed that less. Like we always talk about like validation, right? Needing others' validation. So this is an
Mm-hmm.
aspect where if you validate yourself, like you need it less from others. Like
Yeah,
they don't have to
exactly.
believe in it, yeah, for you to feel
Yeah, and
less
it's not our job to awaken others. It's not our job to make them understand. It's like the people who are coming into this path and aligning with us, like they're already here. Like there is no, like, okay, no, I have to bring this out. No, it's like you just show up authentically, and those who are meant to come into your path will.
yeah, yeah. And ignore what you hear. I also know like a lot of families can be burlones, burlonas,
Mm,
and like,
yeah.
yeah. So protect your peace however you need to. Like if, for example, not off like right off the bat, you don't want to display stuff, do what like feels good to you and will protect your
Hmm.
peace. Um, and then you'll learn to manage and accept your true self as you go, I think. As we've been saying, it's a process, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
all just happen right away.
Hmm.
Um, Whew. Well, thank you so much, Denise, for going there with me. Porque I definitely, like I said, I had it in the back of my mind. I knew people wanted an episode about this, but I knew it had to be like with the right person and with the right
Oh,
approach. So I really appreciate you being up for it también, porque there's people who are at different stages of it. Some are like, I don't want my family to hear me talking about this,
yeah.
or como, yeah.
Yeah.
But thankfully, we're both on, I think, a path where our family knows, and even if they hear this, like we're fine. We won't be scared of them knowing this side of us anymore.
Yes, exactly. No, but thank you. Thank you for thinking of me and having me on here. I really appreciate that.
Yay. Yeah. So if you could just remind people where they can find you on your socials, I of course will include them in the description, and then we'll close out today's episode.
Okay, so you can find me on Instagram or TikTok under Rising from Within 444. I also have my link tree on both of those sites where you can, email me directly if you needed to come to me for anything, or if you have any questions or need guidance on anything. And then you can also book a healing session with me as well through there.
Beautiful. All right, you guys. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Let us know if you are currently navigating this, like what has been maybe your biggest win or your biggest challenge. I think both of us would be interested to hear about that. But yeah, thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. Share it with your amigas, amigos, amigues, primas, primos, primes, anyone, because I know that so many people right now are awakening and are going through
Mhm.
just like maybe being in the closet about it, and needing that validation of like you're not alone. It's normal. A lot of us navigate this still. So yeah, share it with people who you think might need it. Okay, pues cuídense mucho, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.